Welcome to the Author's Edge radio show with Guy L. Freer and Bob Price. Now, their show airs nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Each week on their show, they help authors create books that transform our lives and imaginations. Through radio excellence, they create a unique community resource, one that promotes, connects, and fosters a sense of well-being. Gael and Bob maintain a focus on sharing books, publishing, marketing, and writing solutions. They serve listeners by providing outlets for their creative skills and energies, and they help them flourish in the competitive marketplace. Their weekly show provides intros, writing spotlights, helps you in promoting your book, your writing, your publishing, your marketing tidbits, and much more. Okay, audience, here's Gael and Bob.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Author's Edge, and today I am flying solo. My poor co-host is under the weather. Bob Price is not with us today. Everybody say, "Ah." I'm sorry. But anyway, we are going to press on. We have with us today Roseanne Standard, who is an award-winning artist, graphic designer, and illustrator working from her studio in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. She has over 30 years experience in graphic design and established the Creekside Studio of Art and Design in 2015. Roseanne has worked with companies across the U.S., from Washington, D.C. to California, and outside the U.S. as well as in Canada and New Zealand. She is represented by Campari Gallery in St. Louis, Missouri, and at Artfully Framed Gallery and Gifts in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. And with us also, we have her very charming daughter, Samantha Clouts. Samantha Clouts was born in Fresno, California. She moved quite a bit as a child, residing in and around Sacramento before relocating to Malden, Missouri. Samantha attended the University of Missouri, Columbia, where she earned a BFA in illustration, followed by an MA in Russian and Slavic studies. After graduating, Samantha and her husband moved to Madison, Wisconsin, where she found employment as an in-store sign artist at Trader Joe's. She worked there until 2001, when Samantha, her husband, and their daughter moved to St. Louis and later to Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Since then, she has been working as a substitute and paraprofessional in the Poplar Bluff School District. Samantha now resides on her grandmother's farm, where they have horses, cows, chickens, pigs, a donkey, a pony, 2 dogs, and 4 cats. Have I left anything out?
No, I didn't know. You got the pony in there?
I got a pony.
Yeah.
I got everything?
If we've got Brian, we're good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I didn't want to leave out any little pet.
No. We can go over their names if you'd like to later.
Yes. What are the names?
Gladys Rambo Rebel, Brian.
Okay, slow down
Dominic,
now. I can only do the
Louise, Lindsay, Irving, Appa, Naga, Millie, Maggie, Patrick, Sterling, Spider Pig, Peter Porker. Peter Porker.
He's new.
I think that's everybody.
I only have one child and I have a hard time remembering his name.
My child is much easier to remember.
Did you remember the child's name?
Her name is Charlotte.
Oh, okay.
She wasn't on that list. Though.
She wasn't on the list.
No, she named the pig.
But she has her own name.
And the dogs.
We won't tell her that she wasn't on the list.
She wasn't on the list. Yeah. Well.
Okay. We did, and we have. This is a mother-daughter team. And this was an exciting thing that we have been doing. Today we have the 2 illustrators, a mother-daughter team, and artistic abilities seem to run in your family. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, sure. I actually learned a lot from my own mother, who was an artist and was a painter. As long as I could remember. One of the first pictures that I have of myself is coloring. So it started early. And then Samantha and her sister, actually Jessica, also is an artist. She ended up being a landscape person instead, so kind of went that direction. But
which
The
is an
girls-
artistic talent in of
It
itself.
definitely is.
Yeah, and she has a BA from Webster in
She-
ceramics.
She
so
does. She
yeah,
has pottery. She has a
3D.
degree,
Yeah.
pottery and painting.
Yeah.
And anyway, so they ended up going in that direction too. I did not encourage that necessarily, except that if I didn't know what to do with them when they were children, I always gave them things to draw and paint with. So I guess I did encourage it. But anyway, but my mother inspired me, and apparently I inspired them. And I honestly, it's a little embarrassing to confess that when I went to college, I wasn't quite sure what to major in. And so I thought, well, I always get A's in art. I'll just major in that. So that's what I did. And I didn't actually know what graphic design was at the time. I learned it after I got into school, and then the illustration came later. So kind of fell into it. And then I was really thrilled when Samantha was able to find work as an artist for Trader Joe's, and she did a great job for them. She did some beautiful murals and some beautiful sign work, and just done a wonderful job.
I am actually fascinated by that whole idea of doing
Mhm.
that sign stuff
Mhm.
for Trader Joe's. I mean, can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I went to work for Trader Joe's in 2006 and I left in 2021. And I was a sign artist the whole time. I also did some management stuff. It's a private company that has, I believe, now over 400 stores in the lower 48. And they're based in California, but their idea was that instead of having mass-produced graphic design, like my mom would make, that would be super effective and helpful and able to be spread to all the stores, that they would have an in-store team of artists that would then custom make whatever needed to be made on the spot. And so everything in the store, from shelf tags for every item, which is approximately 10,000 SKUs usually, to displays, small and large, giant chalkboards, murals, outdoor signage.
She built an apple tree one time,
I
three-dimensional
did.
in the produce department.
Built
for
an apple tree, and then I
Oh
built
my.
I
That
built
was
a
cool.
banana tree. I scavenged a bunch of carpet rolls from a carpet distributor and made banana tree trunks with them, and then built an apple tree out of polystyrene.
Very impressive.
I would think so.
It's a cool company to work for. It's private and they have amazing benefits, but they also pay a living wage, so you can be a not starving artist because they also feed everybody, which is great. So that's why I did it for so long. I took a break to have a baby, and then they got me back with a giant mural project. In St. Louis, I worked at 3 out of the 4 Trader Joe's. I started at Brentwood and then went to De Pere, and then from De Pere went to Chesterfield. And Chesterfield is where I did the murals that are in the store right now, actually.
They're on
They're
how
there.
many 4x8 panels?
Oh man, so many. Chesterfield is the largest of the 4 stores, and so redoing the murals there was a challenge. I did it at home on
You did
giant
the murals at home?
Mhm.
Mhm.
I did it-
my.
So
4x8 panels.
4x8 panels.
They're beautiful.
Several murals were 3 panels, so they're 24 feet long and 4 feet high, and they took over the 3rd floor of my house when I lived here. And
It was good that you had a large room up there.
I used to live in St. Louis City in a cool old house not far from where we are right now, and that 3rd floor was really helpful for that project. I made a huge mess. It was very stressful, but it worked out, and I am pretty proud of those.
Yeah.
Actually,
They're beautiful.
They're
Wow.
pretty.
And they're still up. So
And
They
they're
are.
still up.
They're still up. You can go see them. They live there until
Wow.
they come down.
So you guys got involved in Twinkle. How did you get involved in this?
well, as I recall, you and I had lunch.
We did, didn't
and
we?
we were actually talking about, I think we may have been talking about Ralph's books.
Yes, we were.
And you said, I have another project and I need an illustrator for that too. And I said, well, I'm kind of booked, but I have a daughter who is a wonderful artist who is, I think you may have just been moving to the area at that time. I
Yeah.
can't remember. But
And you were
I said,
still, I think you were still working on your house at the time, or you were getting
Probably.
close to the end of working on your house.
I would love to know when I will be done working on my house.
I think that's everybody's story.
Yeah. When I moved to Poplar Bluff in 2021, moved into my grandparents' house, and it had some some issues of just being an old farmhouse
Yeah.
that we needed to rectify. And it was one of those kind of peeling onion, you never ever going to find kind of a experiences. And so as we peeled layers back, we found more things that we needed to address. And so that project grew exponentially. And COVID construction was really, really difficult. So
Right.
it took a long time and was kind of an energy resource, brain power sucking experience. Yeah. So when
It's better now, but
It's
still
better
not,
now.
but it's still not done.
but it's still not
so.
done. Yeah, I got kicked out of where I was doing the illustrations early on and ended up doing them in my bedroom, which is not ideal. But yeah, it worked out. And when I was first approached, though, yeah, I think I was not a great time.
No, it was
And
tricky,
I
and
came
we
back
talked
to
about
it.
that and how are we going to do this, and but Samantha did some preliminary drawings to
Right.
present to see if that was kind of the vibe you were looking for, and turned out that was exactly
That-
what you were looking for. So
That E.E.
That worked out.
Arundel,
yes, asked for
the
so,
author, really did like
Yeah.
the preliminary drawings.
Yeah,
I wanted more with the telescope, I think.
Especially with the telescope.
The
ones.
telescope.
Yes.
Yeah.
that
My
they
eternal
were-
love of
So,
James
how
Webb.
had you ever done any projects like this before, or is this a
I in school, so my area of emphasis for my BFA is illustration. When your area is drawing, you end up kind of specializing in one thing or another. I did an enormous amount of anatomical drawing and figure drawing, printmaking. I did some printmaking. I did a little bit of other stuff, but mostly it was drawing, and ended up taking illustration courses from a really amazing illustrator. His name is Mark Langeneckert. And through that experience, I did some illustrating, but I had not, and I had been approached after school, but it was never a great time. And it was never a project where it was like a job I was being hired for. It was a friend who had an idea about a thing that they thought maybe they wanted to do one day, maybe sometime in the future, maybe if I could just make that happen.
maybe and
kind of
maybe and then maybe?
yeah. It was never here, stop what you're doing for actual compensation and do this project. And this was, so I did it.
yeah. And I had done some books that were just kind of normal 6x9 novel type things,
Right.
And
We
I
did
had
some really nice covers.
I had illustrated some covers, and those had been fine. And that's a whole different animal than children's books with the full bleed, full
Right.
color, plus all the Photoshop work that was necessary. The process for this one ended up, the idea that Samantha came up with, rendering the heroes and the main character in colored pencil, and then doing the background constellations in watercolor, ended up being a really beautiful, kind of powerful combination, because the textures blend nicely, and they I think they give a nice feeling of one thing is kind of outside this world, and the other one is this soft, fuzzy, kind of cuddly part. Although it's interesting because it still works even in the battle scenes where you have like the dragon and the warriors doing their thing. It still works for that too. So
What surprised you about this project?
I don't know. The whole thing was kind of surprising.
Okay, what illustration was the easiest to complete?
For Samantha, I think it was Andromeda.
Andromeda was really fast. Yeah. Andromeda was really fast. Once I actually sat down to draw the final of Andromeda, it was really fast. Leading up to Andromeda was not fast, not even a little bit. The author and I we had an agreement about late night text messages. Because I have a farm and I have a job and I have family. And so my working time was often in the middle of the night and very much on weekends. And so we went back and forth with very late night, early morning text messages for quite a while about Andromeda. Ended up doing studies. There were things that he really specifically wanted.
For example,
Everybody who is human-ish in the book, right? They're gods, so they're human-ish, needed to be discernibly Greek. So no blonde-haired, blue-eyed Greeks. That was a no on the Aryan Greeks. And in addition to that, it needed to be particularly for her. So she's like in a very distressing situation. She's been kidnapped and she's being held captive in bondage. And so she needed to
Look at
read that. Yeah, but she was also a princess. So she had to read princess and bondage and Greek, and trying to get that across in a way that was not Disney princess was a thing that we just went back and forth on. It was never like a whip cracking, do it again, but it was definitely like a not quite kind of a do it again. And the thing about that I was really thankful for is that every time he said, no, not quite, do it again, change this, he was always right. So that was really nice. And he also would respond at 1:00 in the morning, which was really helpful because then I didn't have to wait because I had like a really tiny window to be working. So,
And sometimes, like
Yeah.
with that one, there was a tiny little tweak at the end that I was able to do,
yeah.
where we just
Yeah, his very final little, hey, could you? I was like,
You
I
just-
can't. I can't. And so she fixed it for me.
So he just
Thank you,
wanted her to look
Photoshop.
just the tiniest little bit happier. So I just made her smile. I emphasized her smile
Yeah.
just a tad
Mhm.
in Photoshop, and it worked out just fine.
Yeah.
And I think there were a couple other things. One of the things I
Mhm.
appreciated was Samantha did an enormous amount of research on everything, from the astronomy to the constellations to the like the Greek vases and the illustrations that you see on those. I mean, she was very careful to make sure that these profiles looked like the Greek and Roman
So they had,
statuary that you see.
the Greek
They
nose.
had the nose,
and
they had the strong
yes.
jaws, and they had the that sort of chiseled faces,
Mhm.
and they had wonderful. I don't know, some of the little ideas that she had about the clothing that they would wear and the accoutrement, the kind of little decorative things, were always just dead on and really historically accurate. So I appreciated that. And even to say that, like the constellation, she wanted to make sure that if we had a background that had a sky in it, it was the right sky. It would have the right constellation in it. And sometimes you kind of had to fuss with that to make it work. And so I guess I didn't expect that kind of perfectionism, but I should have. I've lived with this child for a long time.
I'm a hot mess,
She-
Charlie.
she is your daughter.
She is. She is.
She is your daughter.
And
Perfectionism
it worked
is
out.
really
It
my
worked out
MO.
really well, and I'm really pleased because some of that, these are things that you would never even notice unless somebody told you that was true. And so,
Right.
I'm thrilled to know that those things are true and that she was that careful
Thanks.
and that she wanted it to be right in that way. So I'm very proud of the work that she did.
What
And
were,
glad that I could help.
what were some of the materials that you used in creating these images?
Well,
they're mixed media.
they are, and she
as well.
started with one thing, and we sort of evolved to where we ended up.
Yeah.
We had to try some different things to find the right.
Mhm.
the
So what did you
substrate
start with?
We started with
and a
we
watercolor
started
paper,
we started with a watercolor
which was
paper,
not a good idea.
which we thought was going to work because it's got it's thick, which is great. That means you can erase into it and erase into it and erase into it. It doesn't tear or anything like that.
Had too much tooth.
And it has tooth, but it had too much
much.
tooth. We ended up needing a much higher focus than I thought we were going to.
Mhm.
And so we ended up needing a really we
Fine.
needed a hot press, not a cold press paper.
Mhm.
Well, what's the difference between hot press and cold press?
So when paper is made, it looks like confetti, and it's soaked in water, and then a great big screen comes through the water, sweeps through the water, and then when the screen comes out of the water, it has a layer of wet paper pulp, cotton pulp, whatever the paper's made of, flax, can do lots of things, and that or tree pulp,
Right.
but that pulp is then you put felt on top of it, like a sheet of felt, and then you flip it over and you press it. And then once it's dried a bit more, you can do all kinds of things with it. You can press it and make it smooth.
Mhm.
And if you use heat, then you get a smooth paper like printer paper. And if you use a cold press, then you get something that still has the texture of the confetti, more
Okay.
or less. And so that confetti texture is that raw paper texture is really helpful if you were doing something like chalk pastel or even oil pastel, watercolor, anything where there's a whole lot of pigment in a vehicle that will slide. right? So chalk is chalk, right? So if you were to take a drawing that you're doing on a table and you lift it up and there's not enough tooth on the paper, it goes,
Okay.
right? And it just leaves this puddle of delightful things to mess up your clothes on the and if you have watercolor, right, and there's not a channel for that pigment to sit in until it can absorb and dry, then same deal. You'll pick it up and the whole thing will it'll go through the paper. So it looks like, yeah, it looks like a waterfall. Whatever you made, you've now made a waterfall because the water picks up the pigment and it just runs. Gravity
Unless
pulls
you
it
leave it flat until it dries.
until it dries. But even then, it'll puddle
It will.
because the paper
You have to
will
stretch it.
warp. Yeah, it'll warp,
Okay.
and then you'll end up with weird puddles. And I actually have several puddles in the watercolors that I ended up doing. But we used
But
the
they
water.
worked.
Yeah, we ended up finding out that hot press paper that worked really beautifully for the pencil drawings wasn't going to be the thing that we needed for the background, which is a watercolor painting, and those are that original paper that we tried to use for the drawing. We
It's
had
a
whole
really
lot.
it's a really heavy, high grade,
Yeah, it was really
crazy expensive paper.
You got it for a really fabulous watercolor class you did.
I
And so we
did.
knew it was going to work for watercolor, but we didn't know about the pencil.
Yeah.
There's one drawing that is actually on that
Okay.
that original paper.
I need to do a 2-second radio break. You are listening to Author's Edge with Gael Freer and Bob Price, coming to you weekly on Saturdays at 10 a.m. on KWRH 92.9 and KXOK 102.9 FM, and Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. nationwide on My Genre Radio Network. You can also view our latest videos of past shows at authorsedge.com online and download valuable information on marketing and publishing. Okay, so on these two pictures, is one of them the hot or so?
Yeah, actually.
So
The
what do we
hot
have?
press is the drawing that is colored pencil.
This one.
Yeah, and you can touch the edge of it. It
Won't hurt.
yeah, it's smooth. It actually feels like cloth because it's a cotton combo.
Oh,
paper.
yeah.
So
very
it's
smooth.
soft. And then
Yeah.
one above it is rough.
Uh-huh.
And that's
And
the cold
that's
press.
that's the cold
And that's the
press.
cold one.
Yeah, that's the
Mhm.
cold
This
press
is the
watercolor
hot?
paper. Right, right.
And this is cold.
White hot, white hot. What I ended up doing though was there is some watercolor in a couple of them, but most of them are actually they end up being ink. So
Ink?
Yeah. So I ended up being really specific. We mentioned a minute ago about how the author and I kind of insta bonded over James Webb Telescope nerd images that we had just been geeking out over, and how much we loved these really dynamic new images coming out of far reaches of space, and how exciting it was, and the cosmos, and how cool. And using those seemed like where we wanted to go. We wanted it to be big like space. We wanted it to feel amazing like space feels
Right.
when you see those images. And so getting it to be that intense in color was nearly impossible with watercolor paint. I tried with really nice watercolor paint, and it took coat after coat after coat, and I was still only like halfway there. And I switched to Japanese calligraphy ink,
Japanese calligraphy.
which
ink
comes
is-
in all the colors.
And
It's
that's
a much
what-
more
and-
intense pigment.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and it's almost opaque. So where a watercolor paint looks opaque, when you get it on there, it dilutes pretty quickly so that you get a water effect. Whereas ink is not supposed to do that, and it does not. I worked wet on wet, so the watercolor drawings.
You worked wet on wet.
Mhm. So the watercolor bits are that really heavy paper that was soaked onto a big piece of acrylic, and then it sticks once it's wet. Like paper sticks on a napkin sticks on a table when you've put your
Right.
drink on it, kind of. And then from there, the ink was just kind of like blurbed on. Like some of them had eyedroppers. Sometimes I used a brush. Sometimes it was all the above. Sometimes I poured, and got really, really, really intense colors really, really quickly. And was then able to go back and work in white paint pens, white chalk, different colored chalks. I did use a little bit of watercolor sometimes later on, white pencils.
Yeah, this one you can kind of see the pencil work up there
Yeah.
and the
Mhm.
brush work.
Yeah, and then
That one
that-
too, I guess, a little bit.
that one is mostly just plain water to make the speckles.
Oh, cool.
The behind the like background speckles, and then the front speckles are that white ink. So you can get white ink.
Okay.
This one though has chalk pastels that brought in like the smaller bits. If I needed it to not move, then I didn't do it in a liquid medium. So
Okay.
so yeah, that's how that worked. But
You can't control it all the time.
you can't
And
control
so
it.
you have
No,
to-
it's your,
It's a little feels a little dangerous.
yeah.
Okay.
But
Because
it
you
also-
We
know where it's
are
gonna go,
going
yeah.
to commercial break.
Mhm.
And as soon as we come back, we're going to continue our discussion about how we got these gorgeous pictures.
In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page.
El Potro Restaurant and Market, located at 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland, offers the finest variety of Mexican and Central American groceries and goods. El Potro Restaurant serves authentic Mexican and Central American cuisine, including daily specials, not to mention the best horchata and tastiest margaritas in St. Louis. Open 7 days a week. El Potro, 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland.
The United States has a strong tradition of welcoming newcomers and refugees. The Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity for Americans inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety and in turn help strengthen their own communities. Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership that is inspired by what Americans represent to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. All it takes is a helping hand. Are you ready to learn more? Contact the International Institute of St. Louis at info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. That's info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking to Roseanne Standard and Samantha Clouds about Twinkle the Star Mouse and how we got from these wonderful illustrations to an actual book.
Okay.
So we got them from the heart, from hot paper, cold paper.
We've now
to-
made the paper.
We made the
can,
paper. We
Japanese
did
ink.
Japanese ink, and
We
we
did
did
pastel,
pencils and
watercolor.
pastels and watercolor and all kinds
All the things.
of stuff. And then we have these two pictures up here, and this, and then we have. Tell us about the drawing now.
Well, in the studio right now we have Pegasus, and then we have one of the drawings. It was actually the last one that I did, but it
This
is.
one is
but
that
it's-
the last one.
mhm,
But it's one of the first ones.
Yeah,
in
but
the
it's
book.
one of the first ones in the book.
It's so sweet.
I
it
love the
is-
mouse.
Well,
I
I
love
like
the
the
mouse.
raccoon.
Yeah, the raccoon.
So good.
The raccoon
there's
and the
little
moonflowers do it
snail.
for me. The snail
I-
is having
no,
a little
my-
rendezvous.
no,
Is
the
pretty.
raccoon is cute, but the mouse.
Okay, yeah,
He's
pretty sweet.
I love the mouse.
Eating his veggies, doing
Yes.
his thing.
Eating
The baby
his
skunks
piece.
are pretty funny. Yeah, I mean, I have a thing about lichens, mushrooms, fungi, things like that. I think they're super cool. And so there's a whole lot
Well,
of
mushrooms
that.
are really good in salad.
They are great in
are.
salad.
I don't know if you
wouldn't-
would eat any of
I wouldn't
these.
recommend any of the ones in that
No.
picture.
No.
No, although I think there's another one that has like turkey tail mushrooms. You can totally make those into tea.
Yes.
But they're specific. But the moonflowers are maybe my favorite part.
And which
so
one are the moonflowers?
the moonflowers are the flowers that bloom at night, and they're
On
the
the left.
vine that grows up the side of the
Down
picture.
the other side?
It's really
Yeah, they're giant white flowers. They're like saucer sized. They're great
Oh,
big.
they're
and
beautiful.
I just had an
They are.
idea of something we could do with those. We'll have to talk about that later.
Oh, okay, we got to stop
Okay.
redesigning the book.
Okay,
Gotta
so
get it out.
this is the first picture of the book.
One of them.
One of the first pictures in the
yeah,
book.
it's the
Second one, I think.
second one. The first one is the mouse at the lake
Looking at the
Okay.
looking
moon.
up at the moon.
Looking
And
at-
then this one is once he gets home and his family does not think that he is very smart for paying attention to the stars because he is a mouse after all, and that's silly, and nobody lives in the stars. And so then,
His mother says, "Eat your vegetables,"
and so
he's
he
eating
does.
his peas.
He's eating peas because they're beautiful and their flowers are pretty. But then the other picture that we have is once he actually gets to the stars and he has been rescued by Pegasus. And so he's riding on the back of Pegasus. That picture is really of Pegasus. It's not so much of the mouse, but
But we can see the mouse on his back.
right. And that
Looking
one
terrified.
went fairly well after we finally figured out how to turn a regular horse into a celestial horse and then make that horse fly and then make the wings fit in the picture frame and then also make it so that there was a mouse that you could discernibly see in the picture and keep the scale right, and then also not make the horse creepy, but then also turn him into a constellation. And then I really thought he should be pink, and then
And you
thankfully the
really
author
thought-
went
You
along
thought,
with it.
yeah,
Yeah.
you thought it should, and the author went along with it.
He did. He wanted him to still be Pegasus, the like masculine boy horse, and so we kind of split the difference. But
So the author,
make
what
him
did the
pink.
author want?
the author wanted him to be powerful, wanted him to absolutely be wings out. Originally, I had done a drawing that was not good, but it was trying to solve the problem of having the mouse be the central character of the book and be surrounded by creatures that were absolutely out of scale with the mouse.
Mhm.
So giant Greek heroes and dragons and
So how do you solve that?
you change the body position of the giant creatures so that where their action is taking place and where the mouse is situated are close. So
Perspective.
right, there's
was part of
an
that.
illustration of Hercules, and we needed Hercules to be recognizably Hercules. So there's things.
Let's get the book out.
Oh, sure.
Let's take the book
Um,
out. And
so-
find it.
Yes. So Hercules has a whole lot of discernible visual characteristics that are from mythology, and some of the ones that the author was the most keen on were that he is rough and tumble, that he is rugged, but also he wears the pelt of the Nemean lion. And so that is something, he's generally wearing armor. That was something that we wanted to include. Again, rugged, so bearded, discernibly
So-
Greek, dark complected, all of those things. He needed to be all of those things. And so instead of having the mouse on the ground and Hercules full body so that you saw all of those things, he also carries a club, which you can kind of see in the picture. We took the action up to like a chosen feature or two. So the feature chosen is the lion skin that he wears, and the club that he carries, and that he's got a Greek profile, I guess. And then we brought the mouse up, and the conversation is coming to the bigger creature. And so
Okay.
with
So the mouse
Peg-
is on his shoulder.
he's on his shoulder instead of being
instead
like
of at his feet.
on a rock on the ground, which is what happened to Orion. Now Orion goes down to the mouse for that illustration. For Pegasus, I had put the action of the book places him essentially on the back of Pegasus.
Uh-huh.
So that was tricky because horses generally don't like to deal with the things that are on their backs.
Mine anyway.
Unless they're giant people and then they're just
Okay.
trying to get them off. But yeah, so that one again, Perseus is running off. Twinkle is running with him. And the thing that we identified Perseus with are greaves and Greek sandals. And we see Perseus in full size, small, but full size in another illustration. So
And I think I want to jump in here for a second.
Sure.
The one with Scorpio here.
Right. We foreshortened that. So that
Right,
it
that one
worked.
and
Yeah.
Cancer both have a wonderful solution, which I thought was really brilliant. Which is, let's see if I can find it here.
There's
Here we go.
Cancer.
You have Cancer, the big crab back here, but then we bring Twinkle up to the front, so it's foreshortened. So the crab is still big, but he's
Right.
way back, so he
Right.
can be smaller, and the crab and the mouse can be large enough that he's discernible. That was the problem in pretty much all the illustration.
Yeah, almost every
Pretty
single
much.
one. Yeah. Yeah.
So the solutions for that, and you don't want to use the same one every time.
Right.
And so, like where the princess is tied up, we have the rope and the mouse, and we focus on the rope rather than having
Yeah.
show the whole scene. You just focus in on the one part that
Right.
you're talking about at that
Right.
moment.
Right.
So there were lots of
But the original Pegasus was Twinkle on his back, and he's looking backwards, and the wings are kind of around the mouse, kind of like parentheses.
I thought it was kind of cool.
The idea behind it was not bad, but the execution was not solid, and I was having a horrible time trying to find source material for exactly what happens to the muscles in a horse's neck when it turns its head all the way towards its tail, because again, they don't do that unless forced to.
Not very often.
That's not like on their list of things to do on a Tuesday. So like, because I didn't feel like the source material was very good, and because it just wasn't clicking,
Okay.
we didn't fight it, and the author and I came to the realization really early on that if something was just not clicking, we just
It was not
drop
click-
it and go to the
drop
next
it.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
drop it and go to the next thing. 'Cause
Right. Right.
Trying to make it work.
right.
I mean, we ended up shoehorning one particularly stubborn drawing into working, but it was not pleasant. Don't recommend. Do
Don't
not.
Don't recommend.
No.
Anyway, so then after, now can I jump in?
Yes,
Always,
absolutely.
please do.
All right. So Samantha does the drawings. She did the
Right.
watercolor in the background, and then it would come to me. And I am a fine artist, so I have to take photographs of my work, which are then loaded to my website. And I had gone around and talked to some different printers and different people that had big scanners, because normally you would scan art in to do the
Mhm.
work on it. Nobody had a scanner big enough. And even if we tried to piece it, it still didn't work because they had to be in too many pieces because they're too big. And the scale of these was so that we could do a large format book. Usually you want to go at least double the size of what the eventual illustration is. So I decided to try using the same method that I use to shoot my fine art, which is very large. And so I had studio lights set up in my house and set up where I had a backdrop and all this sort of thing and a stand for my camera and what have you. So we tried it and it worked. And I was thrilled because I really was nervous because we wanted to be able to see the pencil lines. We wanted to see all the detail. We didn't want to lose anything, and we didn't want it to warp, do strange things around on the edges, which happens sometimes with photography. So we take a picture of the, like on this one where you have a background that needs to be dropped out. You take a picture of that, and then you translate that to a digital. It becomes a digital file. You make it. I would pull it into Photoshop then and knock out the background, and then and for these, I tried lots of different ways of doing that. There are some automatic ways of doing it, but all of them gave me a rough edge. So I ended up going in and just outlining it by hand all the way around to give it a little bit of a soft, pixel by pixel, all the way around so that the blend would be seamless.
Right.
And so then I would shoot the background and we adjusted the color on those. Sam would sit at my elbow and we would make sure we got the color balance just the way we wanted it for each one. And then I would sandwich those together. And on a couple of cases, we had to do some late edits, and I was able to. She didn't have to redo the whole drawing. I was able to do those edits in Photoshop, so that was great. And
It
I
was.
think
use Photoshop for that.
we use Photoshop for that, and then you can
They're
take it to
hybrids,
whatever.
absolute
Yeah,
hybrids.
they're integrated files. So that gives you lots of flexibility in what you do with it eventually, because you can. Like I could enlarge the constellations or shrink them down as I needed to. I could flip them over. We could use one end or the other. We had lots of room to move that around. So like 2 or 3 of the illustrations have the same background because they happen kind of in the same sequence in the same place. And so we didn't want it to be identical though, because it's a different part of the sky, but in the same constellation. So
Right.
we would shift it around. So you're looking at the same constellation, but you get a different perspective on it.
Mhm.
And so that was nice to have that flexibility.
Mhm.
Anyway, and then we take that back, and then I would lay it out. And set, and the other part I was going to say,
Mm.
when you did the little spot illustrations of the constellations that are in the sidebars, where you
Mhm.
have the adult copy
Mhm.
for the parent or the teacher or whoever
To
to
read it.
describe what's going on, to help understand the history of the constellation and the heroes and the stories of the Greek stories, or in some cases there were multiple stories attached to the different constellations. Those drawings actually went pretty fast. I think that
Those,
was
oh gosh, I did one of them in a gymnasium waiting for my daughter to get out of cheerleading practice. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they were really fast.
so
and
that was one nice
yeah, there was only one that was
quick thing.
that was tricky and ended up being redone completely.
It was Taurus.
Taurus got redone. Yeah,
Oh,
so
he looked so good when he was done.
he looked way better the new way. There are lots of kind of traditional ways of representing different constellations. We had a whole bunch of options for Hercules and kind of rolled the dice, picked one. And then there are some really cool antique etchings of constellations that I was really into. So we sampled some of those pretty hard. And then Taurus was tricky because I didn't realize this for this project, but many constellations are the constellation that they are. So they have the astronomical name that they have, but they are not necessarily, like, the stars don't make up the exact same parts of whatever creature every single time it's reproduced, if that makes sense. So there are
Okay.
some that are always the same. Like in Scorpio, there's a red giant star called Antares, and Antares is the heart of the scorpion pretty much every time. That doesn't really change. The part that says tail goes up and curls. It's also the constellation that is Maui's fishhook from Moana. Anyway, whatever.
Okay.
That's Scorpio. But sidebar. Not to digress too much, but for Taurus, a lot of representations of Taurus are just the head and the horns and like the front foot or two. And in the sidebar, it looked weird. It looked weird to just have the front half of a very large bull with very, very, very significant horns kind of coming out of the ether into not more ether. It was it didn't read like the other ones. The other ones were fully formed. So I found a representation of Taurus that worked better. And so that was another one of those where it wasn't singing, so we needed to ditch it. So we found an alternative. So that was great. That worked out.
Yeah.
And it meant that the parts of Taurus that previously were representing front legs and his front shoulders and nose kind of morphed into other parts of him. And on the but on the drawings, yeah, we it was pretty important to me that it wasn't just a horse with wings, that it was a constellation. And so
Yeah.
I put these great big stars all over them, where they are in the constellation that I drew. So so that one thankfully still worked with the drawing. I didn't have to redo the hard part after I redid the sidebar.
Yeah.
But
Pretty
yeah.
So then you laid
That's
out,
good.
you laid out the two together, and then you laid them out in the book, and then you set up the sidebars.
Right. We set up the sidebars. In the publishing that we're doing, it's not a self-cover book. So the cover is separate. So you set up the inside pages and they have to be in multiples of 4, and that's called a signature. And so our book is 40 pages plus a 4-page cover. And the cover is separate. And well, we don't need to get into too much detail there, but each one of the publishers has their own templates that they will ask that you download so that your art matches it perfectly. And so I downloaded that for each. We tried several different sizes, and sadly, Amazon for a landscape book for the horizontal format, they don't have, they only
they
have
don't-
one option, and it's small. So we're doing that because we need to be on that platform, but we're also I'm excited to do a larger format. So we're set up. The art is big enough that we can essentially do a huge book. I mean, we could do 14 by 14, 16 by 16. It could be really big if we wanted to, because
Right.
we have the
Yeah.
art that big.
Yeah, there was a moment when we all kind of did show and tell about what we wanted it to look like.
Yeah.
And everybody brought a big landscape book.
Big is really good.
Yeah, like they were all just like, no, it's
Coffee
it's all
table.
of it.
Coffee table book.
Yeah,
Here
we
we
wanted
go. Yeah.
coffee table books.
Children's
Because of
Amazon
the,
doesn't think
because
it's a
of
good
the,
idea.
the illustrations are absolutely magnificent.
Thank
It
you.
needs to be a large book.
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
Right.
But
They're
for
pretty fun.
all purposes for the moment, we need to get books out there because we have 2 book signings coming up, and we need to
Right.
have books
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
book signing.
So we're not signing.
So we
bookmarks.
need to get books. I don't care what they look like. I don't know how small they are. We need books
Right.
Okay.
so
and
that we
I-
can
I have a-
sign.
I have a thought. One of the things that I think would be really cool is some of these illustrations, like the one that has the mouse eating the peas. There's tons. Well, the things we were talking about, the
Right.
mushrooms and the moonflowers and all that. It'd be really fun to do kind of a Where's Waldo thing where there's all these different things and you ask children to find those things, but you'd have to have a big format to be able to do that.
Yes.
Mhm.
And it could be an activity page that goes with it. We've got some teacher notes in the back and some websites that we used or Samantha used for resources,
Mhm.
National Geographic and NASA and some of those things where you can get these images. But I just think that would be really fun because it would add another aspect.
Well, in the back of the book,
to the
you
book.
also have some teacher activities.
We do. We have some suggestions for different things, telescope things and
Right.
visit a planetarium or act out the play. You know, you could easily come up with a kind of a little short vignette, kind of a play of the action, of
Right.
the saving the princess or fighting the dragon or whatever. So that would be fun. But I just think that there are so many fun details in there. It would just
There
be great
are.
to do that.
And-
Maybe we could
and-
just do them as a poster or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think on a team of
We
4
could do
people,
that.
when 3 out of the 4 people are either teachers or have been teachers, we were always going to have
Teacher notes.
Yeah.
We're always going to be like, here's your lesson plan. Like,
Yeah. So that's in there, and it's set up too so that parents as teachers can do it. Too.
Okay. So
yeah, and for homeschooling and stuff like that.
Oh,
which
it would
is
be- yeah,
massive.
yes.
Really
Oh,
fun
it's
anymore.
you
Really
could do a
fun.
whole unit on that.
We could.
We're hoping. Like,
Yes.
We're doing a lot of the launch. I remember the timeline of the book changed significantly throughout the project, very much because my pace was not what I wanted it to be. But it ended up kind of working out because we're now able to launch alongside the eclipse and tie in the space component of our story and the fact that everybody's looking up.
Well, that's the,
all of a
one
sudden.
of the wonderful things is that this does fit into the eclipse. There's
Right.
no question about
right,
that.
right.
It fits in with the eclipse. Everybody's looking up. Everybody's wants to see, and this book fits into that.
It does.
Right. And it's made
does.
a lot of the marketing, I think, simpler because we were able to go to the public library and say, hey, you've got a
Yes.
suite of space themed things
Right.
going on. Can we jump on board? And they were like, well, of course you can.
Yes.
And then we went to the schools and we
Margaret
were like,
Harwell.
hey, can we do this? And we went to the
Art
yeah,
well,
even
we
the art museum.
yes,
has
I
a
want
whole
to
lot
make
of
sure
space
I
stuff.
do
Yeah.
talk about that again. We have the Poplar Bluff Public Library, which is located in Poplar Bluff, Missouri,
This
is
the
doing
downtown
a
branch.
March 16th, from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. They have a little event going on where the author is going to be there signing books. And there's going to be refreshments, and there's going to be an art activity there at the same time. And the Margaret Harwell Art Museum is going to have the same kind of event there. It's going to be a book signing with the author. It's on April 6th, and it's from 6 to 8. And again, there's going to be refreshment and a little art activity as well. You're going to have the illustrators, both Roseanne Standard and Samantha Clouds, along with the author, E. Arundel, will be there signing books and talking to everybody about the book.
Yeah, we are taking over the upstairs of the Margaret Harwell Museum. It's an old, cool historic house in downtown Poplar Bluff, and they have 2 spaces, and I believe the bottom space is going to be space themed. It's the plein air
That's right.
exhibit,
The
and
eclipse
they've
art.
they've asked everyone to take their plein air paintings and then add eclipse stuff.
Themed
So
to
yeah,
it.
like stuff in the sky and
Yeah.
Right.
space themed stuff.
It's
So
gonna be
it's going to be really wild. But that's what's going to be in there when you walk in, and then we will be upstairs.
Right.
So,
Right. So we're going to have lots of fun things going on in
Mhm.
Poplar Bluff.
Should be fun.
Especially on that weekend, there's going to be all kinds of fun things going on in Poplar Bluff
Mhm.
because we are at the heart
Yeah.
of the
We
eclipse.
are.
We are.
It's
We
amazing.
are
So,
on the
Dead
path.
center.
It's dead
Yeah.
center.
Yeah. I
So-
believe. We have almost 4 minutes of totality.
Thank you, ladies, for coming in and chatting with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Author's Edge. Tune in again next week for more tips, resources, and favorite conversations. Our next guest will be Greg Stout, and we will be chatting about his latest book, The Gone Man. Till then, see you around the inkwell.